Sheva.
Well, glad you could make it. Up here, you two.
Excella, where's Jill?
Jill. You're like a broken record, you know that? Just as single-minded as he said. You've spent so long trying to track down Uroboros. Well, here, enjoy.
Ouroboros is one of the main catalysts for the events of the game Resident Evil 5. Its name being based off the great snake of Greek mythology named Ouroboros. Ouroboros is a virus. A virus derived from the Progenitor family and developed by Dr. Albert Wesker as a means of creating the ultimate eugenics tool to rid the world of those who have inferior DNA.
Destination coordinates?
Town square's up ahead. Go through there. Alpha team's waiting at the deal location.
Good.
What do you know about Uroboros?
Mostly just rumors. Something about visions of a doomsday project.
Doomsday sounds about right, and apparently it is no rumor.
You're kidding, right?
You must find a man named Irving. He is our only lead.
What would become the Ouroboros project began sometime in 2006, with a man by the name of Dr. Albert Wesker tracking down and finally finding a man by the name of Oswell E. Spencer. Spencer was one of the founders of Umbrella Pharmaceuticals, and ran the corporation as president and CEO when it became the Umbrella Corporation sometime in the 1980s. As a former employee of Spencer's, Wesker had always been curious about Spencer's extreme investments into the company's bioorganic weapons development. And now that Wesker had managed to track Spencer down, the old man came clean about why he had placed such an emphasis on viruses and BOWs during his time at Umbrella. Spencer told Wesker that he had developed these viruses as a means of achieving sort of a forced evolution for mankind. This evolution would put an end to humanity's current form and usher in a new breed of superior beings. Beings whom Spencer would rule over as their new god of this utopia. However, before he could see his dream become a reality, Spencer would need three things: the Progenitor Virus, the basis for which viruses such as Uroboros and the T-Virus would be derived, the Umbrella Corporation, which he would tilt heavily into bioweapons as a means to continue the evolution of his superhuman viruses, and finally Wesker himself, a child from one of Spencer's foregone experiments known as the Wesker Plan. The basic premise being to create an army of superhumans subservient to Spencer to help him control any who would oppose his dominance once the virus was released to the public and natural selection had created his envisioned evolution. Unfortunately for Spencer, however, he made a grave error in relaying all of this information to Wesker. For once Wesker had learned this information, any hold that Spencer had had on him was broken, and Wesker decided that the amalgamation of Spencer's dream would be better off in his much more capable hands.
I was to become a god. Creating a new world with an advanced race of human beings. However, all was lost with Raccoon City. Despite that setback, your creation still holds great significance. Now my candle burns dimly. Ironic, isn't it? For one who has the right to be a god. To face his own mortality.
The right to be a god. That right is now mine.
However, unfortunately for Wesker, Two former comrades of his, Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield, had been on Spencer's trail as well, and had arrived just as Wesker had finished off his former boss. A fight broke out between the former comrades, which ended with Jill Valentine tackling Wesker out of a window. Somehow the pair survived, with Wesker saving Jill's life after the fall, planning to use her as the first subject of the Ouroboros virus. With Spencer's death, Wesker found a renewed purpose. He would take the viruses and money that he'd gotten from Umbrella and use them to create a new virus, one which would achieve his new goal of forced evolution. He began by making friends with major players of the company Tricell, a conglomerate company that had rushed to fill the gap left by Umbrella after its bankruptcy following the Raccoon City incident. Wesker became close friends with a woman at Tricell named Excella Guione, an up-and-comer with lineage that could be traced all the way back to the founders of Tricell. Striking a partnership with the young Guione, Wesker offered her the research that he'd collected from Umbrella, invaluable research which bolstered Excella's rank in the company and allowed him to steer her to a position that would benefit Wesker. Excella became the regional director of Tricell's Africa division, a position that allowed Wesker to delve deeper into the literal roots of the Progenitor Virus by going back to the location where the virus originated, the Nidapaya Kingdom's Stairway of the Sun.
What is this place?
How can they survive underground?
These are no ordinary flowers.
Research, however, did not go as smoothly as Wesker had initially anticipated. The Progenitor flower from which Wesker was creating Uroboros was proving to be too deadly to spur the next step in human evolution. Though, as fate would have it, Wesker found something of a solution to the deadliness of the flower in the most unlikely of places. Jill Valentine, whom Wesker had placed in a state of stasis until a point where the virus was ready, had begun to show some irregularities in her vitals. You see, during the events of the Raccoon City incident, Jill had contracted the T-virus as a result of her conflicts with Nemesis. Jill eventually managed to find a cure for the virus, and while it was thought to have eradicated it completely, in truth, some of the virus still resided in her body, laid long dormant until triggered by something while her body was in stasis. The T-virus had mutated inside of her body, but as Wesker pulled her out of stasis to further investigate the mutated strand, he found that the virus was gone, and in its place were powerful antibodies that had defeated it.
Damn it! Where is she?
Wesker hypothesized that the antibodies created by Jill's body could be used to further his research into Ouroboros, theorizing that he could potentially use them to make the Progenitor flowers less lethal. Of course, this meant that Jill was now necessary for his research, so he couldn't kill her as he had intended. And because her antibodies were intrinsically linked to the research, she would no longer be a viable test subject when Wesker did finally perfect the Ouroboros virus. Over the course of the next few years, Wesker set about perfecting the virus, with a version more or less finalized by May of 2008, when large missiles filled with the virus were loaded onto a warship to then be taken by bomber into the tropopause and dispersed into the atmosphere.
In less than 5 minutes, we'll reach the optimal altitude for missile deployment. Ouroboros will be released into the atmosphere, ensuring complete global saturation.
Though there were almost certainly hundreds, if not thousands, of test subjects for the Ouroboros virus, throughout the course of the game, we only ever encounter 4, with one of them being Albert Wesker himself. The first of these subjects isn't given a name. However, he appears to be a typical citizen of Kijuju, infected by the virus by a mind-controlled Jill Valentine. She injects the man with the virus, and he is soon taken over by the Black Tentacles, a sign that he was unworthy. The second is Uroboros Meccano, who appears to be a test subject of Exceligiones. This man appears to have much more control over the virus, appearing to be worthy of its power, if only for a minute, before he too succumbs to the Black Tentacles. The third subject is of course Excella herself. Being injected by Wesker and sent down to face his pursuers of Chris and Sheva, she too succumbs to the Black Tendrils, sucking in corpses around her to grow exponentially. The final subject is of course Wesker. Having seen his plans become thwarted by Chris and Sheva, Wesker decides to absorb Ouroboros himself, presumably showing us the clearest vision of what mastery over the virus looks like, with Wesker being in complete control, using the tendrils at his will instead of being controlled by them.
I'm just getting started.
Ultimately though, unfortunately for Wesker, the Ouroboros plan was a failure, being stopped by 2 determined agents of the BSAA before it ever managed to be dispersed to the general public. One thing is for certain, however, Ouroboros was a true force to be reckoned with, and the scope of which it could have impacted the world could have been far more devastating had Chris and Sheva not been there to put a stop to it.
What the hell is that?
I think that's what got Alpha Team.